Hey everybody, and welcome to our third and final combat style routing guide. This time I'm here with a ranged guide for everybody explaining what regions to go to maximize your potential when taking that ranged relic. Once again, I do want to cover, there are a couple of things that we need to keep in mind when we are making and planning a route around a combat style. The first is make sure that you have good gear for your style in your region. Secondly, make sure there are fun bosses that you can kill with that style. Third, make sure that you can train all of your different skills, because skilling is just as important as the PVM, because without the skilling, you can't unlock those relics. Those tasks will be very hard to complete if you can't get up there. And lastly, figure out what you're leaving on the table by not taking other regions. So, with that all in mind, I know it was brief, it was short, you've heard me say it a couple of times, but I do want to mention, these are pretty standardized guides. This is not supposed to be any big brain, elaborate metas for you to decide to go through. This is supposed to be guides for what you can expect an average person to come up with and go through, right? It's supposed to be made for somebody who's working 40 hours a week to jump in and have a ton of fun playing the couple hours they can every day, as well as be fun for the guy who's gaming every single day and has some really lofty goals, right? And I want to try to make sure that I hit a route for both of those different groups, because those groups are going to play very differently from one another. That said, you're welcome to mix and match. If there's a region where there's some content that you really want to learn or you really enjoy and you want to really push the limits in a specific boss, feel free to mix and match these as you see fit. This is not the end-all be-all, but this is just a really, really good starting point and foundation for making your route. Now, let's talk about our first route. Just like the mage and melee, we're going to start off with the best in-slot gear for this combat style, ranged. So, when we think about what gives you the most damage, the most potential in a ranged setup, the first thing you want to think about is what is the best weapon. And hands down, no doubt, it is the twisted bow or the Zerite crossbow. Now, the reason why Zerite crossbow is up there is there is a weapon master spec relic that is very, very strong with its spec. At face value, without that relic though, you're looking at a T-bow, and depending on what boss you're killing, even then it still might be T-bow, because if it doesn't have enough HP, the Zerite crossbow blood procs aren't going to be enough to out DPS it. So we're going to assume for now that you have to take T-bow, and then depending on what other regions you pick, maybe a Zerite crossbow might be good. Secondly, we need to find some gear that's good with this. So you really only have 2.5 options, which is Missouri, Armadillo, or Fortified Missouri by taking both. Now, when we look at those, Missouri is more offensive, Armadillo's more defensive. If you do them both, you get the best of both worlds. So how can we pass up getting both? Now, the thing that's really nice about that is by taking Asgarnia, which is required for the Missouri Fortified Armor, you also happen to get the Zerite Vambraces. As well as when you take Zaya for your T-bow, you also get access to Rigor, which is your best offensive prayer. Now, that's 3 regions: Zaya, Asgarnia, Desert. But we don't have all of our slots covered. We're missing out on a cape. We don't have an accumulator or an assembler. We're missing out on a necklace. We don't get your anguish. And unfortunately, ranged is one of those combat styles where no matter how you mix and match things, if you want the best weapon and the best armor, even if you decide, hey, I just want Armadillo and I want to switch Desert to Kandarin, right? So that way I can get my anguish, you're still missing the assembler. Or if you take Fremennik to get your assembler, you're now missing anguish. You can't have it all. So you have to pick and choose on what you think is the best bang for your buck. And in my head, I personally think getting the Missouri Fortified Armor is probably the better route here. You can easily take a Fury or a Glory, right, depending on what stage of your account is, and just camp that for your ranged. It's okay. The backpack is kind of unfortunate that you don't get anything there. You do eventually get a max cape in Asgardia, but it's not quite the same, right? You're still missing a little bit. So something to note is you can swap out that desert region or the Asgardia region, right? Depending on whether you'd want Missouri or Armadillo and whether you want the Zerite Van Braces for another region to mix and match what that extra piece or two of gear is. And there's no necessarily right or wrong answer here, but I personally think a Desert Asgardia Zaya route makes the most sense when you're chasing to do the most possible damage consistently. Now, let's look at that in a vacuum of what order are we taking those regions in? How are we actually routing this? Personally, I think you really want to go and get your gear set up for a good Chambers of Xeric grind before going to Zaya. As such, I think we should probably start with the desert. The desert has a lot of early skilling. You have everything from Squirks to Pyramid Plunder to Agility Pyramid to Mage Training Arena to entry mode TOAs, right? A lot of early game things that you can get away with as your first region to unlock some tasks to unlock Asgardia. Asgardia gives you access to dragons as a second region that'll let you funnel your prayer up to get you somewhere in the 43 to 70 range that we have your overheads. Get enough prayer to make sure you can last through some Ulm fights, right? And then you get your base gear kind of in those regions, right? The desert allows you to do the gem stall method to get your crafting up. Asgardia has black dragons, so you can get full black d'hide. Mistland itself has steel dragons for you to fletch your own rune crossbow, right? So you can go rune crossbow, ruby bolts, black d'hide, and from there you can start full sending TOAs to get a fang. Once you get that fang as a melee weapon, you can then pop over to Zaya, start your Chambers of Xeric grind. Now, one thing that is a little awkward is you don't have a great mage weapon in this route until you get the Shadow, right? Which is a mega rare. Don't expect to get that early. So you're very likely just camping like a fire battle staff and whatever your highest fire weapon is, or your ancient staff, and then whatever your best ancient magic spell is for when you have to attack the mage hand. Hopefully you have somebody in your group who's actually mage relic, and then you can just camp the melee hand with this route and not focus too much on the mage side. And then when Ulm Head comes out, you just get to absolutely obliterate it for some juicy points in purple chance, right? And that's kind of your game plan with this route. Eventually you'll start getting once you get your rigor unlocked from Zaya, I would probably then go and get like an Armadillo crossbow from Asgardia. You can also camp and try to get the Dragon Hunter crossbow and buckler from Zaya along the way to your T-bow grind. So you have a couple of nice middle ground weapons that you can upgrade to. But again, you don't really have a good magic weapon, which is kind of awkward with the TOA and Chambers grinds. So you have to really hope that you have some friends who can really blast those mage phases like Akka's P1 or during Warden P2, where you are kind of required to mage. Hopefully you have somebody to help speed those up to keep you going. And that's our first route. That's our best in slot ranged gear. Now let's talk about our second route. So our second route's a little bit interesting because if you watched my region guides, you will note that I ragged on the main weapon for this route kind of heavily. And even though I did that, I still think this route is very, very strong. And this is the BofA route. This is where you take Tyrnwyn. You camp Corrupted Gauntlet for a BofA. You get your crystal armor. And then you're kind of set for range gear for a long time. That is your entire mid and almost your end game gear really, really early on in the account. Now, I memed on it because the range relic rounds down when it halves your attack speed. So 5-take weapons get a bigger bonus in their damage than 4-take weapons. And unfortunately, BofA is a 4-take weapon, which means you don't get as much of a bonus in extra damage from the ranged relic, but that doesn't mean halving its attack speed is bad. It's still very, very strong. Corrupted Gauntlet is going to be faster to do because you're going to have buffs to your weapons in Corrupted Gauntlet, right? So I still think it's very, very strong as a weapon itself. And the fact that you only have to do one relatively small grind in the grand scheme of things in the main game, it's about a 40-hour grind. Assuming that you probably do this when you hit the like 3x drop rate multiplier, and even if you go dry a little bit, you're looking at under a 20-hour grind, right, to get your BofA. It's not too bad. If you're newish to PVM, this is like the entry, like hard PVM content, and you get to learn it on easy mode. So I think this route is really, really good for players like that as well, where maybe you die a couple times. So maybe this is a 40-hour grind for you because every other attempt you're dying, but you're learning the content, and you can take that back to the main game and help progress your PVM expertise going forward. If you are really comfortable with the Corrupted Gauntlet and your PVM skills, this will be a very fast grind to get some really, really good, solid gear that will last you and let you complete basically every piece of content in the game, which is so good. Now, the thing that's awkward about the BofA route is because the BofA relies so heavily on the buff that you get from wearing crystal armor, replacing your armor set feels really bad. If you get full Missouri, you probably still wear crystal. It's still just more damage, right? So it's really hard to find a way to go from BofA into another weapon or BofA into other gear. And as such, we're actually just going to camp the BofA the whole time. It's going to be your best weapon for this route. And the crystal armor is going to be your best armor for this route the entire league. And instead, what we're going to focus on is upgrading those auxiliary pieces. So the crystal armor fixes your helm slot, your body slot, your leg slot, and the BofA is your two-handed weapon slot, which means we have a necklace open, we have a back piece open, we have boots open, okay? And technically you have your ring open as well. And we really want to find a way to fill as many of those slots as we can to get the most bang for our buck. And the way I think you do this is by taking a combination of Fremennik and the Desert as an addition to Tyrannwyn. And what this does is this gives you access to the Assembler, because Dragon Slayer 2 is auto-completed, which fixes your back slot piece. It also means that not only are you getting 90% ammo reduction and charge reduction, which doesn't matter as much if you corrupt the BofA, but you theoretically might not even need to camp long to do that. But you also get a nice reduction from the backpack as well. But this also gives you access to the upgraded Archer's Ring from Leviathan and the Dagonoth Kings, because you have that combination. And that fills 2 of your 3 slots. Now, the other slot you have is your necklace piece, which is the only way of really upgrading that piece is by taking Kandarin. But Kandarin doesn't offer you anything for ranged besides just the necklace. And it doesn't really have any bosses. Like, again, if we go back to that first part of the video where I was like, what is our priority? And our priority is get good gear, have bosses that you can kill with the set. And Kandarin just doesn't do that. Kraken doesn't really die. You can't range Kraken, right? And then Thermi is there, but why? And then Demonics, again, you'll both of those, but you're there just for one single Zenite. It should be a pretty small grind just to get your Anguish set up. So I don't think Kandarin really does the second point of our big priority list. And as such, I think it's more beneficial to go to Fremennik in the Desert. Give you access to Musta, give you access to the DKs, give you access to TOA, right? Give you some fun endgame content to do, because you're just going to blast through all the content Tyrannwyn has in the first couple of days. And so you really need some content-dense regions as your second 2 regions. And I think this combination does that really, really, really well and gives you ultimately a very, very solid setup where you will be able to blast through all of TOA and all of the Fremennik offerings very, very easily. And then you also have the ability of getting some fun secondary setups for other styles being able to get your Soul Reaper axe, being able to camp Duke with that, right? There's definitely some options here for kind of fun non-range stuff that you can do as well, in addition to all of the really good range setup things that you have. So very, very fun. I think this route will be the ranged, like, I want to learn how to PVM route, because TOA is also the most beginner friendly raid as well. So if you're one of those people who really want to like learn how to PVM, I think this is an amazing starting place. From a practicality standpoint and how you actually would run this route, I think what I personally would do is I would probably start out by getting the desert unlocked, which gives you ancient magics. And I would start by going and finding some place where you can like make money. So you do your thieving, do your agility, do your early skilling, buy a bunch of runes for magic, and start bursting pretty early on to get up to around 90-ish magic, which shouldn't take that long, especially with the XP multiplier. And you can do this at like bandits in the desert. There's lots of multi-combat areas around the game that you can do this. Get up to about 90 magic, and then as you start unlocking your second region, unlock Tyrnwyn as your second region. You then want to go and spend some time getting your range level up. In Tyrnwyn, you have access to catching red chins. You can go ahead and catch those, and you can throw those at the bandits as well, right? Get your ranged up again to about level 90. And then the only other thing you need is some access to prayer training to get your overheads. Now, unfortunately, Tyrnwyn doesn't really offer that. And the desert also doesn't really offer too much in terms of getting your prayer up. So what are you supposed to do? And the answer is actually just doing some quests. You don't have an active way of really training prayer, but you don't need a super high prayer. You can just make like one extra potion somewhere along the way for your CG. Instead of taking in 1 or 2, take in 2 or 3, depending on how good you are with flicking. And even though you have low prayer, you'll be able to last through that fight because that's all that you need. And all you need is 43 for your overheads. And the way you do that is in the desert. If you do the Spirit of the Elid quest at 8x XP, which shouldn't take you that long to get. By the time you unlock Tiered One, you should probably already have that threshold met to get 8x the XP. That'll actually give you enough experience to have your overheads, and actually a little bit more. So you should be hovering right about 45 to ish prayer, which is all you need, right? Obviously it'd be better if you had more, but our regions don't really offer that until we unlock Fremenic. But you don't really need it. So you're gonna go to 43. You're gonna get your overheads. You're going to have 90 mage, 90 range-ish because you caught some chins, you barraged some bandits, you threw those chins at the same bandits, huzzah, we're up and running. And you're going to jump right into CG. You're going to spend anywhere between 20 to 40-ish hours in Corrupted Gauntlet. You're going to get your full crystal. You're going to get your enhanced crystal weapon seed to turn that into a BofA. You're going to corrupt that BofA as soon as you can. If you don't have the shards already, go level up your thieving. Taking Trickster with this route, which is a tier 1 relic that you can take, is very, very strong because you'll get extra seeds by pickpocketing the elves to get the enhanced teleport seeds, which you can break down into shards. Getting extras of those is very, very good and will make corrupting this super easy and honestly super AFK as well. So will be very, very nice, and especially because you can't fail. So you'll just click once and off to the races you'll go. Thieving you are, right? And from there, once you have your BofA, you should have completed most of the Corrupted Gauntlet tasks at this point, which will probably give you enough points to unlock your third region, and you can jump right into Fremenic, go camp the DKs, get your Archer's Ring, go to Leviathan, camp, get your upgraded Archer's Ring, camp Vorkath, get your backpack, right? Get all of those set up, and then you're good to go to jump into the desert. Now you can camp Ancient Magics for your mage. You just take an Ancient Staff and Ice Barrage. you have your BofA for your magic setup, and then your melee setup, you have a couple of options. You can either go grab a whip, you can go camp CG more if you have more tasks to complete there and you really want to focus on the tasks. Going getting another enhanced weapon seed and making a Blade of Saldor is so strong for your melee setup, but you can definitely just go with something a little bit easier. Like I said, Rune Simi, a whip, right? Take that into the TOA, get your Fang, and then you'll just be able to camp Fang going forward. So depending on what your RNG is like, you have a couple of options, right? And that lets you camp that end game content, and then you can start pushing that higher and higher and higher. Eventually you'll unlock Missouri. You probably just bin that to the side. It's probably something you're actually not going to use besides just getting the tasks. Unlocking your Shadow will be a nice upgrade for doing more TOAs. And you can really just work on mechanics and learning how to do different invocations and really making sure that you have a really good foundation. So that way when Leagues is over, you can jump back into the main game and have an amazing way and foundation of doing that content in the main game on your main accounts. So very, very strong. Very, very good. And with that, I just want to recap the 2 routes that I've kind of proposed again and remind you that, again, these are just suggestions. If you want to mix and match and tinker with things a little bit and you say, hey, I'd rather not have this gear and I'd rather have this other setup, or I don't like this boss, so I'd rather do this, feel free to mix and match and customize these to what you enjoy. Because, again, having fun is by far the best way of getting high ranks and really progressing deep into leagues is by choosing content that you actually want to do. So to recap, our first route was our best in slot ranged route, which was a combination of Zaya for the T-Bow, and then Asgardian Desert for your Missouri Fortified, your Zerite Vambraces, and then Rigor from Zaya. And that gives you some insane damage potential between any boss or raid that you happen to go up against. And then our second route is our Corrupted Gauntlet early PVM route that is actually really, really curated for players who are new to PVMing and really want to learn mechanics that will last them ongoing through the main game. Even though the BofA is not as good as crossbows, being able to get a full setup of gear from one piece of content and really learning that content well in leagues will, those mechanics, the movement, the prayer switching, that type of thing that you'll need to do in Corrupted Gauntlet anyway in leagues, translates over exactly how it would in the main game. And even though the fights might be a little bit faster, those skills will last, which is amazing for somebody who's wanting to learn PVM. And then likewise, your end game content for this is very beginner friendly because of the invocation system, and you can go into TOA and you can start with just entry modes and you can learn the mechanics, and you can slowly start creeping that up as you get more and more comfortable, and your gear setup will be plenty to push that invocation up to some pretty high numbers. So it'll be a lot of fun. I definitely recommend the Tirwin Fremnik Desert route for that BofA setup. And I think it will last both for experienced and new PVM players very, very well if you choose to go that route.